my presentation is going to be a little bit different, where Steve and Heather were talking very specifically about Maximo and so forth. I'm going to take it up a notch. We're going to talk about aligning technology with governance standards and data literacy. Those are some industry-wide problems. So I have a lot of experience with lots of different segments of assets and asset management and asset classes and so forth. So let me go ahead and turn off my camera so we can get started here. So in the title here, I have aligning technology. So what does alignment mean? It refers to the process of ensuring that all elements of a business, such as strategies, systems, resources, and activities, work together cohesively to achieve the organization's long-term objectives and deliver maximum value. So as Maximo administrators, you play a key role in bridging technical systems with organizational strategy, whether you know it or not. So this presentation is kind of explore some of the decisions in governance and standards that influence the value of the technology you manage on a day-to-day basis. All right, so who am I? Yeah, I'm that guy in the action figure there. So I've had two careers. I actually spent 22 years in IT before taking my right turn into real estate and facilities, and then spent the rest of my career working in that. I've been very involved with the International Facility Management Association. I'm the immediate past chair of IFMA's Global Board of Directors, and also co-founder of a new initiative that was co-founded by IFMA and Autodesk called the Building Lifecycle Management Initiative. So there'll be a slide on that at the end of this. So I've been in commercial real estate and facility management for over 25 years. I've managed critical infrastructure, mainframe data centers. Actually, a level 3 biohazard lab was in part of my history and things like that. So I've had quite a range of exposure. And most recently, I actually spent about a little over 5 years at GSA with Carson Wynn. And we were working on trying to fix some of the Maximo implementation for Region 8. A lot of data quality problems. So a lot of the stuff that Heather was talking about and looking at the dashboard, looking at the missing information, we had that. And that's not unique to any organization. That is widespread in commercial real estate, and there's a lot of reasons for that. So let's dive into it. So again, what is critical alignment? So when discussing technology, alignment often takes the form of business to IT alignment. So this means integrating and synchronizing a company's technology strategy with its overall business goals, so that IT initiatives directly support and drive business outcomes, like improving customer experience, reducing cost, and fostering innovation. So rather than treating IT as a separate or purely supportive function, alignment ensures that technology is leveraged as a strategic asset, enabling the business to operate more efficiently and gain competitive advantage. Critical alignment is that strategic synchronization of core elements that influence lifecycle outcomes. So keep in mind that misalignment results in inefficiency, redundancy, and missed opportunities. And that's where we are next. So what's the urgency? What's that cost of misalignment? Estimates are $15.8 billion in annual losses. This is from the National Institute of Science and Technology, estimate for poor interoperability. 70% impacted areas, operations and maintenance bear most of this cost. And then the fragmented data increases lifecycle expenses. So as Maximo professionals, you all know the pain of data duplication or missing asset records. Poor data governance compounds downstream cost and diminishes the value of otherwise sophisticated systems. So without managing the data, these things like Maximo cannot deliver their intended business intelligence value. They cannot give you insights because you're using bad data to generate reports. Now, here's the real kicker, is that human oversight will not be sufficient. You need to start exploring tools that are available out there, including data profiling and rule-based validation, cleansing and deduplication, monitoring and auditing. And the key features in those should include automation of that, building in compliance rules, the scalability, and then the data visualization, as Heather was showing. So there are some technologies out there that can help with this data auditing process, because there's just not enough people to look at it every day and make sure that you keep your data clean and high quality. So governance is really foundational. So if you've not looked into data governance or understand what it is, I suggest looking it up. That is a high-level concept. It's usually initiated by leadership, but it also comes with some roles and responsibilities. So data stewards. Without clear data stewardship assignments, even the best CMMS system becomes a liability. And data custodians. So note that everyone who enters new data or updates existing data in a system is a data custodian, whether they know it or not. So I'll share a quick little story. I was on a call, this is a true story, on a video call with a young facility manager, younger, and he was sharing his screen, and it was a dashboard. Lots of charts and graphs and pretty colors. And I just pointed to a particular chart, and I said, can you tell me whether the data that produced that chart is trustworthy? Blank stare. And I said, let me ask you a different question. Do you know where the data that produced that chart came from? Another blank stare. So the answer was no to both questions. And I said, so what you're telling me is that you're going to use this information on this dashboard to make business decisions and recommendations to your leadership, but you can't tell me whether the data on this dashboard is trustworthy, and you don't even know where it came from. What's wrong with this picture? So that gets back to not only data governance, but this is also data literacy. Lots of people in commercial real estate, in fact, commercial real estate slept through the first 30 years of digital transformation, woke up about 5 years ago. The consequences of that is that when you look across this entire industry, and I don't care what level of an organization, the level of technology skills and experience is very low. And now we're throwing lots of advanced technologies, sensor-based technologies at organizations, and the people they're handing it to don't really understand systems. They don't understand data governance, data management, data analytics, or just basic data literacy. So a couple of examples of governance. There's a federal data strategy, is a US government-wide initiative designed to improve the uses, management, and protection of federal data. Its core aims are ethical governance, conscious design, continuous improvement, data stewardship, transparency and accountability, and then access and use. So that's one version of data governance. ISO 8000 is an international standard for data quality management. The key principles in ISO 8000 include accuracy, completeness, consistency, timeliness, credibility, accessibility, and traceability. So those are 7 characteristics of data. I can't tell you the number of times I've walked up to somebody or just had a conversation. I said, give me one characteristic of data. Again, blank stare. And I'll usually say something like complete, accurate, timely. Those are 3 very core ones. But most people that you're working with can't tell you even one characteristic of data. So this is an upskilling issue that we have across this entire industry that we need to look at. So let's talk about standards. There's lots and lots of standards out there. And there's just a few listed on the little icons here. But essentially, their common frameworks enable system-to-system clarity. They support handoffs across lifecycle phases. And really, Maximo integration depends on structured input, structured data. So standards are not just compliance, they're enablers. And you might be surprised that this is not a new concept. For example, the SAE standard was created to address technical challenges in the early automotive industry by fostering collaboration among engineers and manufacturers. In 1905, pioneers like Henry Ford recognized the need for standardized solutions to improve vehicle reliability, safety, and interoperability. Before standardization, companies often used proprietary designs, leading to inefficiency and compatibility issues. For example, early automobiles faced inconsistency with the flywheel and housing designs across manufacturers. Without standardization, replacement parts were not interchangeable, complicating repairs and increasing costs. So SAE was introduced to standardized part numbers, like SAE number 1 or SAE number 2 for flywheels, to unify specifications. Now, in the context of technology, standards really inform your structured data inputs. They reduce manual effort and facilitate automation in systems like Maximo. So we have to think about, the importance of upstream standardization. So standardization starts at the initiation and feasibility lifecycle phase of buildings, which is way before most of you ever see it. So let's talk about policies for a second. There's a hierarchy. It's policies, standards, processes, and procedures. And that kind of says what comes first. But what is a policy? Policy is a formal statement or a set of rules established by an organization that guides decisions and actions to achieve specific goals or outcomes. It provides direction, sets expectations, and ensures consistency in operations or behavior. Essentially, policies tell you what must be done, not how to do it. So how can policies reinforce behavior? So you need to ask, are there clear asset lifecycle policies in your company? Is there a structured data handoff standard? And are there consequences for not following policies? So without policy, systems become a patchwork, and lifecycle policy alignment is really key. So this is something that as administrators, if you see that these kinds of policies don't exist, start bringing it up with your leadership, because it all starts with having a policy. And from there, you define what standards you use, what processes you have, and they have to be repeatable processes. And then underneath that is individual procedures that people follow on a day-to-day basis. I love this one. So processes, this is where execution happens. It's workflows. It's life cycle thinking. Commercial real estate is an industry of silos. So architecture, engineering, and construction do not talk to operations, and operations does not talk to portfolio, and portfolio does not talk to, space planning and occupancy planning. The list goes on and on. Buildings last for a long time. The average lifespan of a commercial building in the United States is about 53 years. So it goes through many owners and may even change its original purpose. So we have to start bringing all the stakeholders together and start developing this life cycle mentality. Because if you're not thinking about life cycle when you're designing and constructing a building, you're leaving out critical components that are needed for operation and certainly for deconstruction in its end of life. So this gets down to the execution part. And I love this saying. It says, strategy without execution was just a good idea. So Maximo only functions effectively when processes are clearly defined and followed. And what that essentially boils down to is, if you can't make this work, draw it out on blue line paper, it will never work in software. That's a myth that you can actually make a piece of software work 27 different ways. Maximo likes things to work one way, but that's all software for the most part. All systems, you need a set of standards that you're following. And poor processes mean poor data. And this goes back to where I said the hierarchy is policies, standards, processes, and procedures. You have to align process documentation with asset standards, governance, and reporting structures. And then you start to have, a good, well-running organization. So data literacy. This is the foundation of all alignment. Maximo administrators are not just tech experts. They're the stewards of building lifecycle intelligence. Data literacy ensures that decisions are driven by truth, not just intuition or impulse. Ask someone to name one characteristic of data. As I said earlier, you get a blank stare. So how can data literacy elevate operational teams? Much like the quality improvement methodologies, teams work much better when everyone is speaking the same language, with the same level of understanding, and aligned to the same objectives. And how often do we see that that is not the case? That's a leadership issue, but it also falls on everyone else in the organization. All right. So aligning roles, this is where governance starts to come in. In general, many real estate organizations are missing some vital technology roles, including technology solutions architect, the systems analyst, the data analyst, and in many cases, the systems administrator. The solutions architect is the person who owns the commercial real estate technology stack in that organization and is responsible for the technology roadmap, not only so they know where we are today, but where are we going. The systems analyst is someone who develops the functional requirements for technology solutions that support business objectives. Talking to business leaders and taking those objectives and translating them into a set of functional requirements so that you can look at products or solutions and determine whether they meet your needs. The data analyst is somebody who turns raw data into information and then turns that information into insight. And in many cases, we've heard from people saying, we have, that should be the facility manager. Well, the facility manager's already got a day job. And most of them are not skilled in data analytics. It's a new discipline for them. So we need people who have both a foot in facility operations and a foot in data analytics that can actually take the data that we're pulling out of these systems and turn it into business insight. And then lastly, the systems administrator. These are the people who basically maintain the set of users, the security, the functionality, and the reporting for a given system, like Maximo. And it's surprising to me that when we see a lot of tools are deployed in organizations, and when they get done with standing it up, they have nobody to hand it to. They have not defined a role for somebody to keep that thing operating as you go forward. So facility operations should not be isolated. It should not bear the responsibility for all these roles and responsibilities. Like I said, facility managers are not likely your data analyst, but you need clear roles and assignments to avoid duplication and organizational drift. So keep in mind, the data derived from Maximo is vital for finance, ESG reporting, maintenance, and capital planning. Are you starting to kind of sense a little theme here of integration and interoperability? So let's talk about lifecycle for a second. Lifecycle often begins long before you see it or touch it. It goes all the way back to that initiation and feasibility or concept stage. Somebody has an idea to build something. Well, that's where life cycle mentality has to come into play as well, because if you don't build it, design it, engineer it, and construct it with that life cycle in mind, you're really harming operations going forward. So poor operational data handoff means poor asset records and diminished operational efficiency and increased cost. There's a study that's been done, it's an academic study that suggests that the lack of life cycle thinking reduces the valuation of an asset, a building, by up to 15%. That gets investors' attention. And then the goal is to shift away from this one-way data flow mentality to realize that is a continual life cycle collaboration. We know that, once you build a building 5 or 10 years down the road, there's going to be major renovations. And what happens? You go back and you say, well, where's the drawings? Well, we have them in the basement someplace, but they've never been updated. So you've lost all of that rich information that was developed when the building was initially constructed. We have to start thinking of that data as an asset, just like the boiler or a roof is an asset, and it needs to travel with the building, not with the owner. So we have to think about how to do that, what technologies are involved. We have a maintenance maturity model. The industry is really evolving toward predictive operations. Maximo is a platform. The power lies in all the inputs, the processes, and the integration. So when we think about what happens today, we have reactive maintenance or run to fail. That's a strategy. It's not a good one, but it's a strategy. Preventive maintenance is still the predominant maturity level in most organizations. And that's the thought process that says we're going to change that filter every 3 months, whether it needs it or not. And then you can move up into condition-based maintenance. That's where you start connecting up sensors to things that are connected now into your CMMS system. Simple example is just a fuel tank. You've got a fuel level gauge in there. If you have that connected to Maximo, you can say if the fuel level drops below 75%, generate a work order to call out the fuel truck and fill it up. You can connect vibration sensors to motors. If it starts to drift out of a defined range, you can create a work order to have somebody go inspect it, maybe even swap that motor out before it fails in operation. Predictive maintenance is where it starts to bring all of these things together. So you're not looking at just sensors, but there's other types of predictions. You do oil analysis on motors to see whether or not there is a potential problem that you need to start thinking about. And the pinnacle is reliability-centered maintenance. You see this in manufacturing. You see it in nuclear power plants. I think Heather works at a hydroelectric. You see it in those kinds of critical infrastructure applications. This is where you want to make sure that you have all of your processes assure that nothing fails in operation. If you're in a manufacturing plant, they can probably tell you exactly how much they lose in revenue per hour to have that manufacturing plant go down or that line. Now, do you want that to happen for a $500 motor and cost you multi-million dollars in revenue? So that's where reliability-centered maintenance comes in. It's not for everything. We don't need that in office buildings in particular because there is not the level of criticality involved. Hospitals, different story. Remember, we have about 10 different categories of asset classes, and hospitality is very different than healthcare. So think about those kinds of things. So what do you do to build a lifecycle-ready organization? We're not constrained by technology. When we talk about this, yes, technology is a piece of it, but where we're constrained is people and process. If people are involved, mistakes will be made, and we know that. And I already mentioned earlier, commercial real estate was the last industry to go digital, and as a consequence, most of the people working in commercial real estate today have a very low level of technology skills. We have to upskill an entire industry, and we have to continue giving them new skills. So what actions can you do? It kind of starts with leadership, and that's consistent communication, support, and feedback. You can't manage what you don't measure. You've probably heard this before. You need to prove that your processes are being followed consistently. So if you put a new procedure in place, can you measure it? Did you put something in place to measure it? If not, you need to go back and do that. That's part of quality management. You're measuring performance, you're measuring processes, you're measuring quality of output products. And I mentioned upskilling. So here we are again. As the consequence of being low level of skills and experience, we have to teach people about systems. There's not a lot of people that understand systems thinking. We have to teach some of these technologies. As Heather mentioned, she came from a different industry and had to go learn about data and asset management. Not everybody is proactive about managing their own career, but that's an example of someone who said, all right, this is interesting, but I need to know more. And I've done the same thing throughout my career. If I didn't know something, I go find out where I can learn about it and develop that skill. And we also have to go back and focus on the foundational elements. We haven't talked a lot about AI today. There's a lot going on, but I will guarantee you artificial intelligence will not fix your bad data. In going forward, we may have better tools to help us keep data quality up and accurate. But if you go fix your data today and you do not have data governance in place to assure that the data is managed correctly going forward, it will degrade immediately and start to go downhill again. So you wasted a lot of time and money correcting all these issues. You didn't correct the thing that created the problem in the first place. And think about this. Digital twins are they have a lot of promise. There's a lot of talk about them. But these are real-time systems, meaning they're using data as it exists today. So if your data is not trustworthy, digital twins are giving you bad information, meaning they will not survive an operation without trustworthy data. So this is also where we've got to stress this cross-functional alignment, breaking down those silos and fostering stakeholder collaboration. If you're not advocating for this actively, you're still part of the problem. So Maximo administrators have the opportunity to lead digital transformation from the ground up. So think about that. If you're not part of advocating for change, then you're still part of the problem. So we have kind of a call to action here. You cannot sit on the sidelines waiting for the miracle to occur. It is not going to happen. There is a long journey ahead. This is a generational change it's going to take. But the longer we wait, the longer it will take to get there. So we have to get everyone started. You have to see yourself as a change maker. Maybe it's a small change, but still, change needs to occur. That critical alignment starts with those who know the systems best. And that's many of you on this call. You know where the warts are. You know where the problems are. You need to now articulate, how do we go about fixing some of these things so that we can actually improve our operation, improve these practices, and leverage the people resources that we have. Everybody knows that we don't have enough people in the skilled trades and that we don't have enough people coming into it. We have to lean more into technology to take over some of these things that we don't necessarily need humans to do. So that's where we need to think about that really long and hard, because we're not going to have enough people. Even today, we used to have teams of maintenance technicians that would go around and do building tours, looking in mechanical rooms and electrical rooms. They often don't have the time to do that anymore because there's not enough of them. So talk to your leadership, ask for a commitment to better best practices, to commit to training, ongoing training, and life cycle outcomes. if you haven't figured this out yet, commercial real estate has become an industry of lifelong learning. So again, advocate, champion alignment within your own organization, speak up for better integration, support and implement governance practices and adopt data standards, and then be that bridge, connect technology decisions with strategic goals, be that translator. So I've got a couple more slides after the Q&A here that I'll just touch on briefly, but let's get into the Q&A. So any insights to share, questions or ideas?
Shannon, do we have any questions?
No, I don't see anything.
You were very thorough, Dean. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation.